Hi, everyone. Welcome to the show. Did Jussie Smollett sway the jury? The actor accused of lying to police about being the alleged victim of a terrible hate crime is done on the witness stand. Closing arguments set to start tomorrow. But first, if there is one government issue that should not be politicized in America today, it's a response to COVID-19. But of course, like everything else it is. We might have disagreements on tactics, but we all want to put COVID in the rearview mirror so we can get about our normal lives. So is it really radical for me to say that I wholeheartedly support everyone getting the vaccine? I don't hate Anthony Fauci, and yet I have concerns about some of what the White House is doing or not doing in dealing with COVID. The Biden administration in recent days has been touting an expansion of COVID testing, distributing millions of kits to various community sites and allowing Americans to be reimbursed for in-home tests through their private insurers. More testing is good. Yet the fact is that the U.S. lags well behind other nations when it comes to COVID testing. In the UK, you can order a free pack of 7 rapid tests every day. In Germany, you can walk up and grab free take-home tests anytime. Singapore making deliveries of free kits to households across that country. Yet for the U.S., testing program doesn't even begin to approach this scale. And at Monday's White House press briefing, NPR's Mara Liasson questioned Press Secretary Jen Psaki about it, and Psaki's response got her into some hot water.
We've quadrupled the size of our testing plan. We've cut the cost significantly over the past few months, and this effort to ensure insurers you're able to get your tests refunded means 150 million Americans will be able to get free tests.
It's kind of complicated, though. Why not just make them free and give them out and have them available everywhere?
Should we just send one to every American?
Maybe.
Then what happens if every American has one test? How much does that cost, and then what happens after that?
All I know is that other countries seem to be making them available in greater quantities for less money.
Well, I think we share the same objective, which is to make them less expensive and more accessible, right? Every country is going to do that differently.
Yeah, but sharing objectives doesn't mean getting it done. Every country is doing it differently, and many are doing it better than we are. A host of doctors and public health experts immediately called out Psaki's response as terrible, flippant, wrong, since the White House cited cost as a reason for not sending Americans tests, while ignoring the massive costs of the ongoing pandemic. And in many other ways, it seems we may not be adapting quickly enough to the evolving science. Like, there was a new article out today in The Atlantic that says, why are we still isolating vaccinated people for 10 days? CDC hasn't changed the guidance on this since July of 2020, despite substantial evidence that vaccinated people who get the virus are not contagious for nearly that long. And the recent messaging on booster shots has been confusing. Dr. Scott Gottlieb, leading voice on the pandemic, told CBS a few weeks ago that the mixed signals from the administration on boosters may end up being one of the biggest missed opportunities in this pandemic. But there's also credit to be given. Putting aside the controversial private business vaccine mandate, every single state in the union has vaccinated more than 60% of its over 18 population. And in more than half the states, it's at least 3/4 of their adult population. And 2 potentially game-changing therapeutics from Pfizer and Merck are on the horizon, working their way through the FDA emergency approval process. How about that? I can be critical of some of the White House's COVID efforts without screaming about how Anthony Fauci is the devil, while lauding some of their other initiatives without making it seem like everything is perfect. Isn't that radical? Joining us now is Amesh Adalja. He is an infectious disease expert and a senior scholar at Johns Hopkins Center for Health Security. He, too, has taken a more moderate approach and, believe it or not, appears on both MSNBC and Fox. Amazing. Doctor, thank you so much for coming on the show. Really appreciate it. So let's talk some common sense here, and let's start with talking about testing. Are we lagging on that front?
We've been lagging since day one with testing. We had massive testing failures in the Trump administration with the botched test kit and then only allowing testing to be done on a restricted number of people, a real delay in getting home tests to people, even though other countries had this, even though the technology was ready. And today we still have that same problem where home tests, you have to drive around in a town looking to see where they may be. They are expensive. And I think we're still doing too little and not really optimizing the use of them. They should be everywhere. They should be what people use to guide their actions. But the way that the administration, this one and the one prior, have used these home tests has really stifled their ability to actually help us to mitigate the effects of this pandemic.
Now, let's talk about evolving with the science, right? Everyone likes to say, oh, I'm just following the science, right? And then they make whatever argument that they're looking to make about their particular cause. Has this administration been too slow in moving with the science, and I mean too conservative in not changing some of the guidance? I mean, we talked about isolating vaccinated people for 10 days, some of the issues like that.
I definitely think that what we've seen is a reticence in general to embrace all of the science. There is a very much the precautionary principle ingrained in what they do. So we do know that people, for example, who are vaccinated and have a breakthrough infection, they're not going to be contagious for 10 days. And we can use those rapid tests to determine when they stop being contagious and release them, because we know that a breakthrough infection, even though it's mild, is very, very disruptive for someone because they have to isolate for 10 days. They have to be off of work. And we can't really think about that being a sustainable approach, especially when the science shows they're not contagious. We also know that people who've had prior infection probably only need one dose of the vaccine to get enough immunity. And I think that adds to vaccine hesitancy, that someone who's had infection isn't recognized. And I think one dose, that makes sense for someone with prior infection. All of that has been out there in the science world for some time, but just not codified into CDC guidance. And I think that's something we need to do as we move forward, as we try to regain the trust of the public. There's so much distrust of public health authorities right now, and I think this just adds to it. And remember, this isn't going away. We need a sustainable approach. We need to teach people how to risk calculate, use harm reduction techniques, come up with a way to learn to live with COVID. And I think this is all stunting that ability.
And I think that's a really important point that you made there. And I think it's a great example about someone who has had COVID only needing a single dose. Why do you think that the CDC, why do you think the government is so reluctant to publicly say that? Because what? People are going to then say, well, you know what? Maybe I don't need any vaccine at all. What's the concern?
I don't know what the concern is, actually, because other countries in Europe, for example, in Israel, they are doing that. There is data to support it. I think they just often in public health want a one-size-fits-all solution. And it's not always going to be one-size-fits-all because there is nuance here. And I think that's something that's missing because what we really want is precision-guided public health. But often that's very difficult for people. They want one-size-fits-all. So it's a simple message that everybody can follow.
Are you surprised by how politicized this has all become?
I am surprised. I think there's been politics from the very beginning, and most of us thought that the biggest obstacles would be getting a vaccine developed so quickly, but we were able to do that. What we can't get over is the politicization. We basically have a two-track pandemic where we can basically predict how someone is going to respond to the vaccine or respond to any kind of public health guidance based on who they voted for or what state they live in. And it's become very hard as someone in the infectious disease world to be able to get through to people because people only see this pandemic based on what tribe they're in. If they're in one tribe, they see it one way, another tribe the other way, and nobody's actually looking at reality. And I think that makes it really difficult if you're somebody trying to tell people what you think is the best path forward, but they don't listen to you except for through those filters and whatever group they belong to. And that's just not how you end a pandemic.
Well, my theory on this has always been that the scientists tend to be cautious, right? That a scientist would rather say, well, let's err on the side of caution. Let's take a longer time. Let's make sure there are more mask mandates, et cetera, et cetera. And I think that when you're talking about public policy on a national level, that you can't just be cautious, that you do have to engage in that sort of risk-benefit analysis and say, okay, maybe we don't need to be that cautious, even though, according to the scientists, that could save additional. I mean, it's sort of like we say, we've got a speed limit in certain places of 65 or 75. Yeah, it might save lives to make it 35 to go on the highway, but we've just decided that it's just not worth it.
Well, all of life is a risk calculation and trying to stratify different risks in your risk tolerance. And I think that's what policymakers have to do. And they defaulted during this pandemic. They did not teach people how to risk calculate or learn how to balance things. For example, having hospitals stop elective surgeries, which aren't really elective. They just mean they have some flexibility in timing, but not others, or stopping many different things like schooling, for example, without really weighing the long-term effects of it. And I think that's where policymakers have to take what scientists say and actually adapted to what's going on. And many of them just abdicated. And that's how we got where we were. And I think this really shows that this pandemic and its impact in the US was a failure of government at the federal, state, county, school district level. They failed all the way through because they have not prepared for pandemics, and they basically panicked and were unable to actually translate that science into actionable policy. And we had all of these negative cascading impacts. And then you ended up basically making the country completely divided. And now it's very hard to actually move forward.
Right, because you have to pick a side, as you said, pick a tribe. And that's why I appreciate your point of view. It's why we invited you on the program, is because I do think we just need a little bit more common sense, balance, et cetera, that I hope more people can join together and say, okay, that makes sense to me. Dr. Adalja, thank you so much for coming on the show. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Coming up, Kyle Rittenhouse pushing back on media from both sides of the political aisle, basically saying, I'm not that terrible. I'm also not that great either. An 18-year-old guy just acquitted for murder, now schooling partisan interviewers who are looking to make a headline that he won't give them. We're taking you behind the headline with Ashleigh Banfield, who sat down with Rittenhouse, up next. Politicization of Kyle Rittenhouse is tragic. Now, I know I'll take heat from the left for complimenting Kyle Rittenhouse, and I'll take heat from the right for celebrating responses that shut down those absurd questions. What does it tell us about our media today that maybe Kyle Rittenhouse is teaching so many in the media a lesson about moderation? Joining me now is someone who spent significant time with Rittenhouse, one of the first journalists to interview him after the trial, my friend Ashleigh Banfield, the host of Banfield here on NewsNation. Ashleigh, thank you for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Dan.
So are you surprised that Kyle Rittenhouse has become the voice of reason about Kyle Rittenhouse?
Yes, but then again, no, because when I met him, I was a little surprised at the person I met. First of all, it was hard to believe he was only recently 18. Because when I was 18, I don't think I could have handled the kind of scrutiny that he's been under. And I certainly couldn't have handled the year that he's been through. What I was astounded at is how much he's been able to process this and how mature he's been at answering grown-up questions from grown-up people. And I wasn't about to give him a free pass. There were times he was very uncomfortable in our interview and looked off to the side at the grown-up that brought him there. But after talking to him for over 2.5 hours, I did realize that this kid knew exactly what had happened, had figured out his place in all of it, has not wavered, and to your point, thought that those questions were absolutely ridiculous. That he got celebrating people dying. Give me a break. Who does that? I mean, they just got away with themselves with their entertainment show. People were killed that night, and I don't think Kyle was the least bit happy about it. He never smiled once about it.
Well, and and Ashleigh, you actually asked him in your interview about taking pictures with, some of these far-right characters, right? And I don't think that you knew exactly what he was going to say, right? When you asked him about that. And saying, like, what are you doing in this picture? And of course, it seems almost inexplicable. And then yet he explained it to you.
And he was believable. And I don't want, people to think I'm some, neophyte in this business. I've conducted tens of thousands of interviews. It's been 34 years at this game. I kind of know when I look someone in the eyes that if I'm getting garbage in return. I also watch people on the stand a lot for a living. And I also get a pretty good feel for when someone's trying to act, and not everybody can be Meryl Streep. But I will say this, his response was, so he was surprised. First of all, I don't think he was expecting the question. I don't think he knew most people really knew much about that, even though it had made some press. But I found that his question was authentically answered. He seemed like he was bewildered by the situation he'd been put in that bar. He'd been brought there by Lynn Wood's team of attorneys to find bodyguards, and felt like these guys were all construction workers, and then posed not knowing what he was doing. I actually looked at the picture, Dan, with a little more circumspection, and it does appear to me although I'm not the best arbiter here, that he's kind of not clear on how that signal is really supposed to be formed, that hand sign. It looked like he's awkward. So I can understand if someone said, do this, and he mimicked. But I certainly did get a good feel from him when he said, when I did find out, I severed ties with all those people. I never hired them as my bodyguards, and I felt awful about it.
You know, it's tough as a person who's 17 or 18 years old to not want to be celebrated, right? To not say, this is something I'll say, and these people are going to love me. He's got this enormous opportunity to become a right-wing hero, and he's not taking it again and again and again. He's not taking the bait. And, you know, your interview was one of the only, if the only, journalistic interview. And again, I may be wrong, that maybe there have been others, but that Kyle Rittenhouse endured. The rest of them have been very partisan. Final thought on this, Ashleigh?
I'll tell you this. At the time I did the interview, I did not know that he had had a visit with Donald Trump. It had just preceded the interview. After the interview, his handler mentioned it to me. And I said, well, what were you thinking? Because you said all along tonight that you didn't want this to be political. And having a visit at Mar-a-Lago with Donald Trump is going to be political. And they said, we've asked that those pictures aren't used publicly. He wanted to meet the former president when the president called and did not want it to be a spectacle. And then pictures were released. I was actually astounded. By the way, that was said prior to pictures being released as well. So I got that response from his handler before any pictures were ever made public. So I believed it. That wasn't an excuse for anything because there was nothing to make an excuse for at that point.
Right. All right, Ashleigh Banfield, great to see you. We'll see you tonight at 10 p.m. Eastern right here on NewsNation.
I'm keeping score, too, which means you have to be on my show at some point when I call.
I will. I will. You know, except you're preparing for your show when I'm on. I would have to stick around. There's a little difference. I'm just saying. A little easier for you than for me. That's all I'm saying.
Can't hear.
All I'm saying.
Sorry, can't hear.
All right. Ashleigh, see you at 10. Mark Meadows in full damage control mode. Former President Trump not happy about his new book or his cooperation with the January 6th Commission. So one had to give, and it has. Real news about fake news is coming up. Time now for our Mediaite moments, where we check in on the day's bias, buzz, and bull in the world of cable news and beyond. It is no secret that former President Trump demands complete and total loyalty, which has made things tricky for his former chief of staff, Mark Meadows, who was Trump's right-hand man during the last year in office.
Mark Meadows changing his tune, now cooperating with January 6th investigators. But the full extent of his cooperation still unknown.
Not surprisingly, Mr. Trump was apparently not pleased with that announcement, but there was more to come. Stunning details from Mark Meadows' new tell-all book.
Former President Trump's chief of staff, Mark Meadows, making a stunning admission in his upcoming book, writing that the then president first tested positive for COVID-19 on September 26th, just 3 days before the first presidential debate.
And of course, cable news had a field day with it.
The White House team, the president, his entire senior staff, were willing to endanger anyone and everyone in order to advance the president's electoral chances. They were willing to endanger the life of Joe Biden.
According to Meadows, a follow-up test came up negative. But Mr. Trump did end up contracting COVID 3 days after the debate. Not surprisingly, the former president released a statement accusing the media of fake news. This eventually led Meadows to go on television and almost claim that his own book was fake news.
What is the story here?
Well, the president's right. It's fake news.
It's a little bit nuanced there, but unfortunately for Mark Meadows, that pound of flesh wasn't quite enough. Multiple reports surfaced that Mr. Trump was less than pleased about the book. While he may hate the book, Mr. Trump really hates the January 6th Commission. So there was another way to say, I'm really, really sorry.
Mark Meadows now says he will no longer cooperate with the January 6th committee. It is a quick reversal for Trump's former chief of staff, who just began to work with lawmakers on the thousands of documents they were requesting.
Real news for when calling yourself out for fake news isn't quite enough. Coming up, actor Jussie Smollett getting combative on the witness stand as he insists the attack on him was not fake. Closing arguments are tomorrow. We'll go behind the headlines tonight. The evidence is in and complete against actor Jussie Smollett, the former Empire star. Smollett is charged with 6 felony counts of disorderly conduct after allegedly filing false police reports in connection with a staged hate crime attack that prosecutors say he orchestrated on a frigid night in January of 2019. Smollett was back on the stand today, seeming combative as prosecutor Dan Webb questioned his communications with Abel Osundero, one of the 2 brothers who testified that Smollett paid them to stage the attack, which included wearing red hats to look like supporters of then-President Donald Trump, putting a rope around his neck and pouring bleach on him, and yelling things like, "This is MAGA country" in Chicago. The cross-examination revealed some inconsistencies with Smollett's testimony. On Monday, Smollett testified that messages between him and Abel, who Smollett says had been hired as a personal trainer, not as his attacker, were to set up a workout for that day, not to arrange a hoax attack. Today, when Webb asked Smollett if he used Instagram to send private messages to Abel Osundero regarding the timing of the fake attack on the night in question, Smollett denied sending the messages. But then Webb showed Smollett 4 messages that he sent to Osundero on Instagram that night, the last of which was sent about 90 minutes before the alleged assault. And when asked whether any of those messages mentioned a workout on the night of the incident, Smollett admitted they didn't. But then he fired back, well, there was also no messages about an attack. Prosecutors later pointed out that there were also no messages or calls between Smollett and Osundero about canceling the training session after the attack, right? Think about that. If they had a training session scheduled, right, he would have called them after the attack, said, by the way, I'm not going to be able to have our training session. But prosecutors don't believe there was a training session. So yesterday, Smollett claimed he and Abel Osundero had multiple sexual encounters in private rooms in Chicago bathhouses, claims which Osundero denies. But Smollett testified he didn't even recognize Osundero's voice during the assault, saying in that moment, I'm not going to stop and say, hey, Bola, a nickname for him, is that you? It was an attack. It happened fast. Smollett also admitted today that he'd driven the Osundero brothers to his apartment building downtown in the days preceding the allegedly fake assault. Video from the day shows the group circling Smollett's block multiple times, passing the staircase where the assault took place 3 times. Smollett offered inconsistent explanations, and last week the Osunderos testified that the meeting was a dry run for the fake assault. Remember, yesterday Smollett testified that he was attacked by a large man in a ski mask with, quote, pale skin. He assumed the man was white because of the racial slurs the attacker used during the assault. But today, when pressed about his recollection of the attack, as well as his initial interviews with Chicago detectives investigating, Smollett acknowledged that he told officers the attackers were white. He also denied telling police he was the victim of a hate crime, saying that he merely told them he was attacked. And when asked if he knows that the Osunderos were his attackers, Smollett said, there's no way for him to know that, but then prosecutors pointed to video and GPS evidence as well, as the brothers' own testimony that they attacked him, in addition to that. Now, Smollett then questioned the brothers' credibility. He said, well, they're liars. They also said I had something to do with it, and that's not true. There was one other exchange that caught my attention. During last week's testimony from Abel Osundero, Smollett's lawyers questioned whether the brothers had offered to refuse to testify in exchange for $1 million each. The Osunderos denied that. During a second round of questioning today, Smollett's attorneys again brought up the bribe claim. Smollett testified the brothers made the offer, but he turned them down. But later when the prosecution asked Smollett if the brothers actually made that offer, he hedged, saying, well, a representative for the pair had reached out to his team. So the evidence is in. Remember, prosecutors have to prove the case beyond a reasonable doubt. How have they been doing? Let's bring in attorney Terri Austin, co-host of the nationally syndicated program Law and Crime Daily, which also appears on the Law and Crime Network. Terri, good to see you.
Good to see you too, Dan.
All right, so how do you think Jussie Smollett did on the stand?
What a tangle web we weave. I think that he's not looking good.
Really?
Yes. And I think that because we know it was the Osundero brothers. The prosecutor already said that the authorities have confirmed that. So if that's the case, and Jussie Smollett knows these people, why would they be attacking him? I just think the whole premise is faulty.
But it seems the defense is trying to suggest that maybe there was a third white guy there, right? Which could help explain why he said that they were, because these guys, I mean, I don't know if we have pictures of them. The Osenderos don't have pale skin, right? I mean, I don't care, black, white. The idea that it's some sort of pale, that's not them, right? So there's no way that description, there they are, that description could fit them. So there has to be, for Jussie Smollett not to have made it up, somebody with paler skin somehow, right? And the claim is that maybe there was a third person there?
Well, that's the problem with his testimony. There wasn't a third person there, or at least there's no third person in the video. And we have some video of that. And so I think his testimony is very faulty. I think the jury is looking at this and saying it just doesn't all add up.
Do you think if he's convicted that he'll actually serve time?
I don't. I mean, I think he will probably pay some money as far as the authorities wasting time doing this investigation. Maybe he'll go on probation. Maybe he'll do community service. This is not the type of crime where they want to put someone behind bars. I think the message is if he's found guilty and he has to at least do some probation, at least some community service, it'll help as far as the message.
I think his best hope is the legal standard, right? Is the proof beyond a reasonable doubt that the prosecution has to overcome. And that maybe a juror or two will say, I think prosecution's theory is probably right, but I don't know. There's some problems with it, and maybe that's enough. No?
Well, that might be enough because, as you know, obviously all 12 jurors have to convict him, and there might be a holdout there. It might be someone who, to your point, says, I am not thoroughly 100% convinced, even though it doesn't have to be 100%. It has to be beyond a reasonable doubt. And there could be a juror who has some doubt, and that could hold up the case. We could have a mistrial. We certainly could have not a conviction. So,
closing arguments, how significant? We're expecting them tomorrow in this case. Most of the time, I'm always the one saying, closing arguments are super important. I don't even know if these closing arguments are that important. I've got to believe that the jurors have kind of already made up their minds.
I think they probably have. But I think it's nice to have someone who is putting the story all together, adding up the pieces, closing out all of those holes that might already exist, especially as it relates to the defense. I think the prosecution already has a good story. I think the defense has more work to do as far as this closing is concerned.
Yeah, well, I mean, the bottom line problem is his story is incredibly far-fetched.
It is. It is. From the very beginning,
yeah.
Dan, the whole story, why
Right.
did he do this?
Right.
Just to have higher ratings?
Well, I mean, but his defense that somehow this was real, right? That these guys who are friends of his go and decide to yell racist stuff at him and attack him and...
Right. I mean, that is the whole problem from the very beginning, that these are his friends.
Right.
If it was somebody else, then maybe we could, have some sort of story that he was attacked. But these are people he knew, and there's evidence that he knew them, obviously.
You would have thought the one thing he shouldn't have said is that they were white, right?
Yeah.
I mean, no, seriously, it's become, as an inconsistency, the biggest problem
That's right.
for him is, in any case, you're describing your attacker.
That's right.
Tell me what he looks like.
That's right.
Right?
There are several inconsistencies, and that's one of them. I mean, the other inconsistency was the whole news thing. He had it on. He kept
Right.
it on the whole time. He didn't keep it on. But the fact that he couldn't describe his attackers and was so mistaken, and it's a huge mistake. There's a huge difference between these brothers and someone who is white.
Yeah, think? Terri Austin, stick around, because we want to get your take on another case that we got coming up. This case, former Minnesota police officer Kim Potter. You saw her there in body cam footage. She accidentally shot Daunte Wright during a traffic stop, clearly grabbed her gun instead of her taser, but was she criminally reckless in not being able to distinguish between the two? I think this is going to be a close case. Coming up next. Opening statement set to begin tomorrow in the high-profile trial of Kim Potter, the former Minnesota police officer who shot and killed 20-year-old Daunte Wright in April after seemingly mistaking her handgun for her taser. Now, here's the moment of the shooting that will prove critical in the trial. we should have probably taken it back there a little bit, but the 26-year veteran of the Brooklyn Center Police Force resigned 2 days after the shooting. Her attorney already said she's going to testify. She's charged with first-degree and second-degree manslaughter. 49 years old, pleaded not guilty to both charges. Now, in Minnesota, a person can be convicted of first-degree manslaughter if the state proves that Officer Potter was reckless in her handling of the firearm. That could mean up to 15 years behind bars. For second-degree manslaughter, the state has to prove that Officer Potter was consciously disregarding a risk of death or great bodily harm and prove the defendant consciously took actions that created an unreasonable risk. The sentence could be up to 10 years. Remember, this trial is being held at the same courthouse where Derek Chauvin was tried and convicted of murdering George Floyd. Back with me to discuss is Terri Austin, co-host of Law and Crime Daily. All right, so Terri, we were talking about this before. I view this as going to be a relatively close case. I don't know how the outcome is going to turn out. I think it's funny because initially what I'd said about this case was it's all going to come down to the video, but I'm now not so certain. I think her testimony and her explanation about how and why she had her taser where she thought, she had her gun where she thought she had her taser is going to be the critical question.
It will be a critical question, and I don't think it's going to be that close. I think the jury is going to want to find her guilty of either manslaughter 1 or manslaughter 2. Remember, she's well trained. She had 27 years of training in the force. She was actually training someone when she was right there during that whole arrest. And so I think the jury's going to say, look, you should have known better. The family wanted murder, and they didn't get it. So but
you have to agree. There's no way this is a murder charge.
Oh, I agree.
Because you have to believe, regardless of what you think on the legal side, it was a mistake.
Yes.
She didn't do it. She didn't want to kill him. She wasn't intending to kill him. The question becomes, does her negligence rise to the level of criminality?
Correct. And I think the jury is going to say yes, either to manslaughter 1 or manslaughter 2. Here's the rub. There's so many people who want to hold her accountable. And I think they now have an option on these 2 charges to hold her accountable. So whether or not they say, look, this was reckless use of this firearm and it ended up killing someone, or whether they say this is culpable negligence and it ended up killing someone, they're going to find her, I think, guilty of one of them.
I'm not so sure.
Because
I think you've got the possibility that jurors are going to, that at least some of the jurors, I wouldn't be surprised if there's a hung jury in this case, by the way.
That can
Mark
happen.
my words. And I don't predict hung juries that often, but this case is one of them because it was so clearly a mistake.
Yeah.
I think that's going to work in her favor. Doesn't necessarily mean she's going to get acquitted. I'm not saying, oh, she's definitely going to get acquitted. What I'm saying is, this is why I'm going to be watching so carefully about her testimony.
But Dan, if they really follow the law, they can say to themselves, this was clearly a mistake.
Yes, they can.
Yep.
And they could still convict.
That's right.
No doubt about it.
That's where I think they're going to come out, because I think even though they go in saying there's no pressure, there's no political influence, I think in the back of their minds, they know that this is someone they have to hold accountable for this death.
Yeah, I'm not so sure, because there's going to be a lot of support, I think, on the other side. Police groups and people who support police officers, et cetera, who are going to be saying, look, mistakes happen. Right. And unlike in Chauvin, right, where cops were watching that and saying, this is absurd and ridiculous, what he did to George Floyd, I think cops are going to watch what happened to Kim Potter, and some of them are going to say it was just a mistake. The question, of course, will become, why don't these mistakes happen more often? If it's the sort of thing that happens all the time, it doesn't.
Yeah, it doesn't. And it shouldn't. And her training, I think the jury's going to say, should have kept her from making that kind of mistake. It's a big difference between a gun and a taser. They carry it on different sides. And she trained people on how to do this. Yeah. So I think the jury's going to say, you should have known better.
Let's see how her testimony goes. The good news is there's going to be a camera in the court, which I think is critical for a case like this, so people can watch it for themselves and make decisions for themselves, the way we did in the George Floyd killing, as we did in the Rittenhouse case, as we did in the case of Ahmaud Arbery's killing, et cetera. I think it's so important to have that there, and I know you're going to be on top of it on Law and Crime Network. We look forward to having you back.
Thanks, Dan. I appreciate it.
Coming up. Bullets fly, sending officers ducking for cover as they try to clear a house. And a man hiding inside a bedroom starts firing. We'll break down the insane video with former sergeant, or former lieutenant too, Sean Sticks Larkin, coming up. Time for our police cam segment. An officer in Modesto, California, chased a guy on a motorcycle who wouldn't pull over after failing to yield to traffic. And a sheriff's department helicopter kept the suspect in sight, following him all the way to a home.
Put your hands up. Turn around, put your hands up. Put your hands up. Get on your ground. Hands on your head. No, dude, hands on your head. Get down on your knees. Down on your knees, hands on your head. Why are you down me up, dude? Put your hands on your head. You're not going back inside that house. Okay, both hands on your head right now.
Police found drugs on the motorcyclist as they detained him and another guy while at the scene. Officers obtained a warrant to search the home. They made multiple announcements to other people inside, telling them to come out before they went in.
Attention anyone inside 3100 East Orangeburg. This is the Modesto Police Department with the search warrant. Come to the door now. If anyone is remaining inside the basement, make yourself known now. We will be searching the basement with the canine. If the canine finds you, you will be dead.
Now, 3 more people walked out of the home as officers prepared to execute that search warrant. I want to warn you, what happened next is difficult to watch.
Everybody, loading them. Load them. Okay, let's go. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3. There we go.
Okay.
Mike, you're okay.
As police opened a bedroom door, an armed man, Jesse Brooks, opened fire, shooting Officer Mike Rokaitis in his bulletproof vest and in his right leg. Another officer pulled him out of the line of fire, and he was rushed to a hospital in a police car. Officer Rokaitis underwent 7 surgeries. Part of his right leg had to be amputated. He was eventually released from the hospital and taken to a care facility for rehab. Police shot Brooks, who suffered non-life-threatening injuries. He was charged with 3 counts of attempted murder on an officer and also had an outstanding federal warrant. The incident is still under investigation. Joining me now is Sean Sticks Larkin, retired Tulsa police lieutenant. Sean, again, take us in this situation into the officer's perspective going into that home.
Well, Dan, you know, part of my assignment here in the Tulsa Police Department, I was in narcotics, I was with the gang and gun unit, and we have literally done, I'm honestly going to guess 600 to 800 search warrants, somewhere in that number. And what we saw happen here in Modesto is something that we fear every single time. And prior to doing the search warrant, you're going to have a search warrant briefing. You're going to discuss assignments for everybody that's part of the team, what their role is. But some of the other things you're going to talk about is what we call an officer down drill. In the event that this scenario happens, you repeat this over and over every single time to the officers of what we're going to do if an officer goes down. And one of the things you talk about is if an officer goes down, the next officer steps up, delivers, rounds towards the threat so that we can pull the injured officer down. And that's exactly what we see happen here. Once the officer goes down, he's right in that fatal funnel, that doorway. And one of the officers has to still get himself up there to try to pull the injured officer out. It's very, very difficult to do.
Well, you know, and we saw this a lot when you and I were on live PD together, was that search warrants were executed, and in, the almost every single case, right, they're just going through and they're empty doors. And that's what cops are used to seeing, right? Every single door, they've got their weapons out just in case, but the doors are empty. And it's just not what you expect to happen.
Yeah, and that's it. You talked about everybody else that came out of the house, and they're all going to be interviewed, as they come out. We're going to try to get intelligence from them. Hey, is there anybody else inside? Are there kids inside? Is there a dog inside? If there is somebody, where's he at? Does he have a gun? And things like that. So we do rely on intelligence, even from the people that we already bring out. But, that doorway, whether it's the front door, a bathroom, or in this case, a bedroom, the suspect is always at an advantage over the officers. He knows there's only one way that these cops are coming in, and it's through that door. We don't know where the suspect's at. So if somebody is, bent on hurting a cop or trying to kill a cop, they can set themselves up in a position like this suspect did, and they're going to have the advantage every single time on us.
Yeah. Again, I just think an important reminder of what police officers face every day in this country. Sean Larkin.
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much. Good to see you.
You as well, Dan.
One of these days we're going to do a lighter one with Sean and me. I love having banter with Sean, but, I can't. We see something like that, and it's devastating, and it's serious, and it's important. Does it for us tonight. NewsNation Prime starts right now. Thank you for watching. Click the red subscribe button below so you can get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.